And hello, welcome to the Social Justice Forum. I am your host, Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. Now, if you're asking the question, what is the show all about? We bring you a forum that discusses and provides a deeper understanding of the issues, I should say, and the inequities that so many people and so many communities face. Things such as systemic inequalities to pressing social problems. Our guests provide multiple perspectives and also insights, helping us better understand and address these challenges. So we invite you to stay connected to us. The Social Justice Forum starts now. And we are back as the federal landscape grows increasingly hostile towards the transgender and gender non binary individuals, particularly with recent executive orders from President Donald Trump targeting these communities. New York State stands as a beacon of hope. The state's leadership demonstrates a commitment to safeguarding the rights and well being of trans New Yorkers, but with growing threats from far right agendas, more is called on to be done. Joining me now is the interim executive director of the New Pride Agenda. We've got Kai Williams, and thank you so much for being with us. I don't have him. I think I need to hear you, and I don't quite hear you, but we'll get that going, I think, in just a second. But let's talk for a second about this because as we look at the president, a lot of work has been going on since he's taken office, particularly these executive orders. And looking at these executive orders and seeing what's happening, your response to them.
The executive orders that have been executed just in the past week, obviously for us reflect a larger dangerous agenda, right? They are designed to undermine LGBTQ rights, obviously TG and CV rights, but also the rights of many marginalized people who hold multiple identities. And so part of what we've been really trying to do is provide safety for awareness, education, and support, but respond accordingly. Unfortunately, these executive orders weren't surprising, and at the same time, they are increasingly overwhelming to us and other communities.
What about your constituents? I mean, hearing and seeing what's going on coming out of Washington D.C., the reality actually now hitting. What's been the response and what's been the conversation within the community?
And there's a statewide organizing and advocacy organization. So we are based in New York State. That does not mean that we are not receiving the same calls of concern and considerations from our members. Obviously, people are concerned about having access to gender affirming care, having access to the programs and health services that they have been able to receive here in New York. But also, again, most LGBTQIA identifying people in New York live intersectional identities. So we're also having, these issues compound with folks who, for example, might also be migrant and trans, right? Might also be incarcerated and trans, but also the issues that are impacting our youth and impacting families that support those youth, right? And so part of how what we're hearing is not just these calls in terms of access to care, but also access to safety, access to just being able to live their lives on a day-to-day basis. And so it is a full-on attack for our community. And part of how we're responding as an advocacy organization is trying to ensure that our elected officials, our governor, and those who currently hold the legislature here in New York are willing to answer the calls to action to continue to protect the rights and provide direct resources to transgender individuals here in New York. And for us, that would be most actively calling on the governor to continue to hold strong to her call and what she has done in resourcing the Lorena Borjas Transgender Wellness and Equity Fund, which has been a $4.25 billion fund that specifically funds trans serving and trans-led organizations in New York. And those organizations provide the care that is currently under attack by this incoming or current administration. And so for us, as an advocacy organization, we're mandating that the governor stand strong to those politics and stand strong to her principles of supporting the TGNC community. Um, Outside of that, as a community-based organization providing direct services. So we have an empowerment center here in New York City. We also have a chapter in Western New York. And so we are also holding community actual spaces for our community to gather in safe environments, be that accessing our food pantry here, or accessing our support groups. So we're trying to do both things. On the advocacy front, it's really adjusting policy, and then on the community safety front, it's actually providing more programs and ensuring that community have safe spaces to gather.
Yeah. Let's talk about the executive orders and the constitutionality of what's really going on here. From your perspective, not just say from your perspective, but from the perspective of those who are in the community, talk to me a little bit about the constitutionality factor and what you feel is right and how you feel is, or I should say, what you feel is wrong, and how is it wrong?
I think the primary executive orders, there's been many and they're rolling, right? So I think the first executive order was in the framing of defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. This executive order is very interesting. It's unconstitutional, but it's also something that we saw in Trump's first presidency, and it attempts to narrowly define gender as binary, that is determined at birth. But we know that gender and sex are two separate things, two separate subjects that actually don't actually belong together, right? And so this executive order tries to make gender synonymous with sex. And sex is such a like broad range, and I think that it actually causes more harm. And when you attempt to flatten an individual's reality and their identity to live outside of the gender binary, this includes not just transgender people or folks who might transition. This is also including folks who might be intersex, folks who whose traditional gender does not even as a sex fall within the default binary of female and male, right? And so the implications of narrow definitions is something that we actually saw in the first Trump presidency, but the expansion of it through an executive order again is being challenged in various ways in terms of the constitutionality of it. And we really find this to be a matter of pseudoscience, right? Science that is not based in what most world health practitioners actually believe in how we undertake the roles of sex and gender. Um, it also seeks to halt the uses of gender X markers, which is something that takes place in terms of identifying or for one to be able to self-select their identification on their entry cards. But part of this is that this has already been challenged legally before, and it will continue to be challenged again. I think it was challenged in last challenged in the court case, a federal court case in May of 2020, which the government, rightfully aligned with this individual, the holder's sex, in terms of what that person or how the person wanted to identify has already been taken under charge in this federal court case in 2022. Um, and then again, it targets protections for incarcerated trans people. We already are seeing a lawsuit that has been brought forth by an incarcerated individual in Massachusetts who was trans identifying, and they're charging against this constitutionality against the Eighth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. The cruel and unusual punishment that has already also been federally legislated before. And so all of these things that are rolling out are both ideologies, yes, executive orders that are primarily constructed to really serve a conservative far right, agenda that is much larger than just the LGBTQ community or the TGNC community. But unfortunately, we are caught in the primary crosshairs of most of these executive orders. But all of these executive orders are going to be constitutionally challenged, litigated, both for their cause and how they can actually be implemented. And I think that's the hardest part for a lot of our community members is understanding, especially in a state like New York or as New York residents, right? How does this actually impact our living experience? And so it is causing a lot of overwhelm, a lot of fear, but we have a lot of faith in our government. We have a lot of faith in our attorney general. We have a lot of faith that here in New York, in the home of Stonewall, right, that these protections and the things that we have put forth, such as Proposition 1 here in New York State, will be able to kind of keep us as a safe haven and a stronghold. And these are the things, again, that I continue to think about here in the Pride Agenda in terms of that. Yes, we are an LGBTQ organization, but our members hold intersectional identities. And so the onslaught of offenses on all marginalized bodies and on many marginalized people is really concerning, but we're actually really prepared and we feel like New York is prepared by launching, for example, the Empire State Freedom Initiative, which is a coordinating effort that is happening between our Attorney General and our governor to ensure that New York is ready to really deal with these kind of like rolling out executive orders that are really harmful and quite frankly pretty violent.
I want to get an opportunity to share a little bit about the Empire State Freedom Initiative, and that is one of the things that are actually in place to protect rights. So, for people who are in New York, give us a little insight into the Empire State Freedom Initiative.
State Freedom Initiative was something that Governor Hochul came out with right away in partnership with the Attorney General Tish James' office. And this is really a joint effort between both the Attorney General and the executive branch, and being committed to defending against these unconstitutional actions through legal actions and legal challenges specifically. And this for us is really important because we know that we live in a country where, yes, there is federal rights and yes, there are executive orders, but there are limitations to what executive orders can do in the construction of federalism, which is how our government is structured. And so the states do have rights and the states do have protections. And our attorney general and our governor can challenge these executive orders and the impacts of them on the basis of constitutionality. We saw this very quickly with New York joining in on the challenge of the executive order for birthright citizenship. For us, we actually expect the same. And I think that we would call on our AG and our governor to respond rightfully on what these protections that we have in New York State and how the executive orders that are put forth against the LGBTQ community, the TGNC community, within that community, how the current executive orders are really, not in alignment with some of those things, right? For example, last November, voters in New York, over 4 million voters in New York, the overwhelming majority of New Yorkers voted to pass Proposition 1 or Proposal 1, which is New York's Equal Rights Amendment. That Equal Rights Amendment included in its protections enshrining anti-discrimination protections on gender identity and expression within the state constitution. So New Yorkers overwhelmingly support, right, having equity within human rights. And so what we're calling on when it comes to the Empire State Freedom Initiative, right, is not just undertaking coordinated efforts to protect things on the basis of citizenship, but to also challenge on the basis of the New York State Constitution where there might be issues and areas that kind of are anti what's happening in these executive orders. And we feel very, very hopeful about that. I mean, that's why we worked on Proposition 1 last year. We worked on Proposition 1 because we were aware of the possibility of a Trump presidency. We were aware of what Project 2025 was setting forth to be kind of this onslaught, this 900-page document of supporting the far right conservative agenda, right? And we are a nonprofit organization, right? So when it comes to our politics, we are very neutral. But just as the fact of the matter is that the federal policy agenda and blueprint for restructuring our rights in this country is very concerning. And so we worked on Proposition 1 as a make sure to ensure that yes, we do have rights and protections in New York, but those rights and protections are now enshrined in our state constitution. And this kind of gives us a little bit more ground to kind of build our case and to challenge these executive orders.
Yeah. When we look at transgender communities, obviously a lot of work is being done to advocate, and advocacy is going on in I should say the state, across Washington, D.C. as well. But how can those who are in the trans community be able to also join in this fight and join in making sure that their voice is being heard?
PNC community has been at the forefront of many movements, right? I think queer and trans New Yorkers, queer and trans people have always been involved in social movements historically, right? So when it comes to being what trans New Yorkers should do or what queer and trans people should do, we have efforts that have happened. Folks have gone down to Washington, D.C. People joined the People's March that happened a couple of weeks ago. Gender Liberation March has been convening people for folks who want to be out in the streets, and that is their calling. For us at New Pride Agenda, part of what we are asking for is people to join us in calling on the governor to ensure that she passes the Lorena Borjas Transgender Wellness and Equity Fund, that she expands it, and she continues to commit to that. And you can do that by, following our organization, by supporting our organization through membership, through volunteer opportunity. We are a statewide organization here in New York, and we are part of a coalition of various coalitions of various issue areas. And we are also part of national initiatives as well. And so New Pride Agenda is here to be an advocacy organization, but we can only do that work by having folks who are, yes, impacted, but also who are prepared to get involved in the advocacy and the policy work. And I think that that's really important for folks to understand that there is actually things that can be done. There is work that can be done, and there are ways that we can resist and that we can fight back. And that is by joining organizations like New Pride Agenda. That is by ensuring that your elected officials are responding accordingly to the federal hostility. And that is making sure that those responses are done by, making sure that we're ensuring the safety and wellness of all New Yorkers. LGBTQ people, TGNC folks live, yes, we have unique experiences, but we are impacted by the same things that all New Yorkers are impacted by. We are impacted by housing, we are impacted by unemployment, we are impacted by healthcare access, we are impacted by the same exact issues that all New Yorkers are impacted by. And that is what New Pride Agenda is work is about, is ensuring that we have an equitable stake in what takes place, right? And so Lorena Borjas, Transgender Wellness and Equity Fund, is an attempt on our end and a commitment in ensuring that trans serving and trans-led organizations across the state get their fair share and being, resourced properly. And that's what we look forward to. And I think the last thing that I would, say specifically to the TGNC community outside of the political awareness is just know that New Pride Agenda as an advocacy organization that is made up of queer and trans people who share in that lived experience, that you are seen, right, as TGNC community members, that you are valued and that you are loved, right? And that part of what New Pride Agenda is here to do is to stand unwaveringly, in the fight for those rights and for that dignity and for that safety.
I gotta ask you to really talk about the Lorena Borges Transgender Wellness and Equity Fund, because that is something that's out there, and I know that it's near and dear to those in the transgender community. For those who may not be so familiar, please give us a little bit about the fund and tell me about its efforts.
Borjas Transgender Wellness and Equity Fund was a fund that is named after a trans Latina elder, Lorena Borjas, who did a lot of community organizing, a lot of community work, who unfortunately we lost during the COVID pandemic. And this fund was initially drafted and put together as an opportunity to, again, provide equity within resourcing communities that identify and or serve transgender individuals. So it is a fund that supports trans serving or trans-led organizations across New York. New York is the home to the second largest state level fund in the country that's dedicated to trans health and wellness. And that is thanks to the work of New Pride Agenda and its allies, those who joined us in Albany in advocating for this fight. The late Cecilia Gentili was part of that fight and that effort as well. And what the Transgender Wellness and Equity Fund does, or TWEF, as we call it, is that it has in total provided over multiple year grants, $12 million to trans serving organizations specifically. And the reason why this was outlined from the state budget is that even though there is funding in our state budget that does go to the health and human services of LGBTQ organizations, a funding report of organizations, of nonprofit LGBT organizations, found out that only 4 cents of every dollar of dollars that are allotted to LGBTQ organizations, only 4 cents on the dollar actually makes it to trans serving or trans-led organizations. And so for us, that was the cause of saying we need specific money to provide a more equitable space and services for trans serving and trans-led organizations in New York. So this has resulted in currently standing a $4.25 million annual commitment in partnership with the executive branch in New York and the legislature in New York. And these services, provide trans-led, trans-servicing organizations to provide services such as gender-affirming care, housing, workshops, support and safety groups. And it's statewide. So it's from organizations that are based in New York City, that are based in Hudson Valley, that are based in the capital, that are based in Western New York, Niagara Falls, that are based in the Southern Tier, and small towns like Oneonta, New York, that folks don't know about, right? But that might have, TGNC and does have a TGNC population that does need to be served. And so, it offers that money is broken down through health and human services, the Department of Labor, which offers workforce development programs as TGNC folks are underemployed. which we know the governor actually constructed a report on this. And also the Office of Mental Health and Wellness to help support young New Yorkers that might struggle with suicide issues and suicide prevention measures. And so that's how the fund is broken down. And what we're actually calling for is the expansion of the fund, especially right now, given the federal hostility. And we're asking for that in order to address the growing concerns, obviously, of Black and Brown LGBTQ New Yorkers, and individuals to ensure that like all trans New Yorkers can access the care and safety and wellness that they need, given what we were just talking about before, the executive orders. And so Lorena Borjas Transgender Wellness and Equity Fund is our way of making sure that equity is happening across New York State within the LGBTQ community, that folks are able to continue to receive the resources and services that they have, and that New York is able to remain, as it proclaims itself to be, a safe haven for TGNC people. And so it's very important that the TWEP is expanded. It's very important that people continue to support it, and that we actually continue to support the organizations that are on the front line of receiving people who are either fleeing other states, moving around the city, looking to access care. The Lorena Borjas Transgender Wellness and Equity Fund provides for that. It provides for that in such a way that ensures that trans people, queer youth, non-binary folks are receiving their fair share.
So for yourself, give me the sense of your thoughts, your feelings since January the 20th. What's it been like for you?
Since January the 20th, unfortunately, I was not surprised. And I think I continue to come back to that. I am not surprised at what we are experiencing. We lived through a Trump administration 1.0. It was actually very clear, both in the verbal statements of the incoming election, the preparation through Project 25, what could be expected if we were in the space that we are in right now. And so it has been indeed a lot more intense. I think than anybody imagined, not just myself, but I think many people did not imagine the onslaught to be this rapid and this aggressive on the front end. But in terms of myself and how I'm keeping myself, kind of grounded in the space, is being able to lean on the work and the practice, and knowing that yes, I live in New York, but New York is, not without its own like issues and causes. And it's important for us as the Pride Agenda, in this current role, even as interim executive director, right? It's important for us to double down on protections. It's important for our governor and for our elected officials to stand beside us as champions as they have for the past few years, right? And not back down, but to really stand up and be on the side of LGBTQ New Yorkers, to understand the power and the presence, right? Not just of, the work and the legacy of what does it mean for New York, the home of Stonewall, to stand strong, but the actual economic power that LGBTQ New Yorkers have, the actual voting power that LGBTQ New Yorkers have. And again, I go back to Proposition 1, where overwhelmingly all New Yorkers believe in the rights and protections of equity in our state. Right, so I'm really urging everybody, including myself, to really undertake the charge of making New York, New York. And what I mean by that is making sure that we stand our ground, making sure that we provide the safety that we need, that we remain a sanctuary state for LGBTQIA plus New Yorkers, and I'm doing that in my work with the Pride Agenda. I'm doing that in the work with my team. And even for myself, right? Like, I don't just name affirmations here for everybody else. As a transgender identifying individual living in New York, I reflect the same affirmations back to myself, right? I matter, you matter, I care about you, we care about you. And I also hold those affirmations for myself. Yes, it has been overwhelming, but I haven't lost the faith. I know that our community will continue to fight back. I know that our community is resilient. I know that we will survive this. And I want everybody to have that same sense of resilience, and to understand that, yes, it is difficult right now, but I believe strongly in our democracy. And I believe that if we all have been kind of, singing, ringing those bells for the past, 2, 3, 4 years as to what is at stake, then we need to understand what is at stake here now is much bigger, right? Even though we are in the focal point as TGNC people, the attacks on our democracy are very serious. And as an American, as somebody who believes in this country and believes in democracy, those are the larger things that I think about. And those are the larger things that I'm actually willing to fight for.
And as the fight continues, tell us how people can join in on the fight.
New Pride Agenda is a statewide advocacy organization. Folks should visit our website. Folks should follow us on social media at New Pride Agenda. We have a lot of opportunities. Even our legislative agenda is set forth by the community. What do you want us to, take part in terms of policies that we follow? And so we are very deeply steeped in the democratic practices of what does it mean to be an active, civically engaged citizen of the state, of this city, of this country. So I would invite people to join New Pride Agenda, or to get plugged in wherever you are. The chances are that if you are in New York State and you are working on an LGBTQ issue, New Pride Agenda is either present in that space or in partnership in that space. But I invite folks to know that we are here as a resource, and we will continue to fight and advocate for the rights and protections of all New Yorkers, particularly LGBTQ identifying New Yorkers, those who live at the margins. We will continue to do that fight. And we hope that folks are willing to join us in that. We have to kind of, get off of our couches, get off of our social media platforms now, and really be ready to take up the fight. And that could be, activating an advocacy network. That could be supporting a food pantry or mutual aid network. There's a lot of ways in which we can really, fight back. And so we invite people to join us at New Pride Agenda in that fight, however you see fit. Trust and believe there's a role for you, for anybody who is really interested in advocating for the rights and safety of LGBTQ New Yorkers. And New Pride Agenda will be there to make sure that you know your place and that you can get to work.
Kai Williams, Interim Executive Director of the New Pride Agenda. Thank you so much for being with us.
Here.
All righty. Listen, we're taking a quick break. We'll be back with more right after this.
Only 57% of New York City high school students are college ready by their senior year. "55% of high school graduates either have no plans to attend college or are uncertain that they will ever attend. "34% of young adults don't go to college because they can't afford it. Discover what's possible. BronxNet's education programs, internships, and opportunities help engage and inspire Bronx youth and beyond to pursue their passions. Be a part of the BronxNet family. Whether you're interested in our shows, joining a class, or donating to support our mission, visit BronxNet.org to learn more.
What's up, creative family? Discover your voice with BronxNet Community Media classes. Are you ready to bring your ideas to life? At BronxNet, we offer television production classes for community members ages 18 and over, empowering you to share your vision with the world. Get certified in field production, in-studio production, and our new exciting addition, podcast production. Once certified, you can create your own show to air on one of our 6 TV channels. It all starts with our free Unleash Your Ideas Masterclass, designed to help you plan your show idea and set you up for success on your production journey. This class is offered at the beginning of each month for your convenience. Our dedicated BronxNet team is here to support, encourage, and uplift you every step of the way. Join us and become a part of the creative force that engages and inspires the Bronx community and beyond. Sign up today and start your media journey with BronxNet. Visit BronxNet.org/education to learn more and register. Let's create something amazing together.
And we are back. The New York City Council approved the City of Yes housing plan, which is a $5 billion initiative aimed at creating over 80,000 new homes to address the city's housing crisis. And while this ambitious plan has been hailed as a significant step forward, it's also sparked discussion about the equity and unique needs of different neighborhoods. Join me now, City Council member of District 16. We've got Althea Stevens, and thank you, Councilmember Stevens, for joining us.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about being here.
Glad to have you back again. And yeah, when we talk about this here, obviously a major concern when we talk about, this investment that's made in housing, but all investment isn't always good investment. Is that true?
Listen, I was one of the people who it took a while for them to get me to a yes on that proposal, because I am a true believer of District 16 has done their fair share of building affordable housing. We are number 6 in the city on the amount of units that's been built in the last couple of years around affordable housing, and other districts have not. And so this plan was sold to us around equity. And then there were things that was put in it that did not feel that way. But, because of my negotiations, I was able to secure some major wins for my district, which, I'm really proud of and really think the community can benefit from. One of the things I was able to get is the city's committed to doing a study for a ferry on Harlem River Drive. This is something that people in my district and people in the West Bronx have been advocating for a number of years. And so this is the first step of us getting a ferry. I was also able to secure over $48 million for parks in my district. Also, the city committed to do some home ownership with some of the projects that are coming down in the pipeline. So for me, it was about how do I make sure that we also get wins out of this and make sure that the people in my district are able to walk away with some tangible goods because we deserve it.
Yeah, we've been talking about ferry for a long time in the borough of the Bronx, and obviously you've brought this one step closer to reality. How optimistic are you on the ferry situation?
I mean, honestly, I'm super optimistic. I've been talking about this since I got into office, because in the Bronx, we only have one ferry port, which is, to me, is unacceptable, especially when we have so many places of the Bronx that are this would be another option for people to come in, to get in and from their homes in a safe way. And there's no talks about expanding train lines in the Bronx or even expanding bus lines. So to me, having a ferry, I think it would be a great amenity. Really excited about that. And again, we're one step closer. Like I said, the study is the first phase that it takes to get a ferry line to be put on this side of the Bronx.
Yeah. Let me go back to housing for a minute. I want to talk about the City of Yes housing plan and, the importance of it. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, this plan, it took me a while to get to it. We've been building affordable housing in my district before my predecessor left. They did the Jerome Avenue redistricting. So we were building up I don't have a lot of public land left because there's been so much building. So for me, I understand this idea around we need to build more housing stocks, but we really need to be targeting some of these areas that are not as dense and who have not done any building. There's parts of the city that has not built in years and has not built one unit of affordable housing. And to me, that's really unacceptable because certain communities cannot carry the burden.
Right. So how do we get to a place of equity? Because I think that's really what the major thing is, right? We want to see equity when it comes to housing, and how do we go about that?
Yeah, honestly, I think one of the things that I proposed when we were at the very beginning of negotiations of that, like we should have had a pause on areas that have been building a lot of housing, and then started in districts that have not, and started there, and then worked our way back, right? Because even in this plan, it doesn't stop people from coming into the district and building more and making dense districts even more dense. It just allowed them to go into new spaces and took away some of the like technical pieces and building up a little bit higher. But I think that we also still need to kind of force some places who don't want their community to change or they say things they don't want certain people in their community. I think that we still need to put a lot more pressure and actually push more to get those things done.
Yeah. And I mean, I've always said that there is no question that New York City is definitely an overpopulated place, and we all know that, right? But then when he talks about housing, you get to watch all this housing that's being developed. But while you're watching the housing that's being developed, the question is who's going in it, and
Right.
how are we going to be able to navigate that? And we do know in the Bronx, there's a lot of talk about gentrification and no equity. So, from your perspective, are you happy with what you're seeing by way of this balance between new housing that's coming, and at the same time also ensuring that the rights and privileges of those who've been here a long time are not forsaken in it?
Well, listen, my first priority is always Bronx residents and District 16 residents above everything, right? And so for me, it's always thinking about what does our community need? And so for me, I've been really pushing back on this idea that the only thing we need is extremely low income because we have people in my district who are also being priced out. We forget that sometimes people get, new certificates or they get college degrees or they have families and their income does go up. And so we need to also be looking at like, what does affordable mean for different tiers of people? And so that's been something I've been really pushing in our district around like, I want people who go away to college to be able to come back to the community and have nice places to live, have nice things here as well. But in addition to as we are building up, we also need to be thinking about what does the economic development in that community looks like, right? You can build housing, but also do we have daycares? Do we have schools to support that? Do we have laundromats? Do we have the other, medical facilities? Do we have the necessities to ensure that people can thrive in this community and don't have to leave to get bare necessities? And so that's another thing that I think that's really been missing out of this conversation.
I've often heard the conversation about this, and it kind of gets me going, if you will. I don't understand how we talk about economic development and how the affordable housing crisis and how we need to continue to build, and yes, you do need to build for those who are poor and don't and are financially challenged. However, we do also understand this is the success and the revitalization of a community comes when you also have middle class housing, when you have the ability to bring people to the forefront who can earn a living and a substantial living and have them in a neighborhood that does something for the community. And while there is this push for low-income housing, and there should always be a push for low-income housing, there also has to be a push for this mixed community, because it's the mixed community that's also going to help to develop the community that's going to be sustainable for a minute. So
you are speaking my language, and we are both on the same page, but sometimes that get lost in the conversation. And even in this conversation, we're talking about renters. We're not even talking about homeowners.
Right.
That has been pushed to the back, which I'm just like, that is unacceptable, which is why in the negotiations, I was advocating and saying that we need home ownership in my district. People need to have those opportunities. When we're looking at people leaving the city, and specifically Black families who have left the city, we've lost 20% of the population in New York City, Black families. It's because they don't have opportunities for home ownership. And we have to figure out what does that look like. And so I was really pushing back because it was really about how do we walk and chew gum. Yes, we need renters and we need people who might want to rent, but we also need people who want to have home ownership opportunities. And the city's not talking about that at all. And so I'm really grateful for my colleagues who also was bringing home ownership into this conversation during the City of Yes process.
Yeah, and what's that conversation been like? Because I think sometimes it seems like it's fallen on deaf ears. We have to talk. I mean, we definitely have to bring that to the forefront. I think Americans in New York City, and particularly New Yorkers, should have the opportunity to have a home, to own a home. You shouldn't have to move to Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina to accomplish, quote unquote, the American dream, particularly when you've been born and raised here.
Absolutely. And this is something that me and my colleagues have all been fighting for. Last year, the Progressive Caucus, we were able to get money put into the Open Doors, program, which would allow for more developers to build co-ops and condos throughout the city. We've also been like, just even through City of Yes, we were the ones talking about home ownership and how do those opportunities be a part of it as well. Myself and a group of other colleagues who are part of the BLAC subcommittee called Black, which is Black city local electeds who came together to put together a Black agenda, went to Albany this past week to talk to the governor about what are the options for homeowners, how do we keep people in their homes, and had a really productive conversation because we understand that home ownership is a fundamental part of the American dream that we're just not talking about in New York City.
So what is the response that you get back from people when you have this?
So the response is people are really open, but I think sometimes we also have to push on the developers too. So I know specifically for me in my district, anytime developers are coming to talk to me, that is always my question. How do we have home ownership? And like, yes, I love that you're doing 150 units, but how many of those can you set aside for home ownership? And so also working with HPD to actually promote that as well and like really get the term sheets together for the open doors policy so that developers can start using it, because we've also seen that the HPD has been stalling on getting those term sheets out.
Yeah. Walk me a little bit through your district, because let's go through District 16 for a minute, because when I think about, the housing burdens, talk to me about District 16, and you guys have been disproportionately affected.
Yeah, we've absolutely been disproportionately affected. I mean, we have one of the highest number of shelters in the city. And for us, it's thinking about how do we get more resources to those individuals who need the support. We also, when we think about like home ownership, we have some home ownership, don't get me wrong, but we absolutely need more to continue, like you said before, to help build thriving communities around businesses and things like that. But we've been building affordable housing. Like I said, we're number 6 in the city on the number of units that have been built in the last couple of years. We've been building, and we're going to continue to build. But we want good developers who are coming in here with good faith, who wants to build, not just studios. We also want to get more family units because the city's also been pushing studios. We really want to see more family units for those bigger families and generational families so that people can live comfortably.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about a vision for a ferry. I want to talk about the vision for a STEM center and the importance of that. And I know that's near and dear to your heart as well, having science, technology, electronics, math, having that right there in your neighborhood. What would a STEM center mean for you?
Well, that was another, and thank you for bringing that up, because that was actually another win that we got in the City of Yes negotiations. The city did promise to identify space so we could have a STEM center. So I'm really excited about that. I'm always trying to find ways so that we can have proactive things for our young people to do in our community. And it's really important. We know that our young people, when they're exposed to things, they thrive, but we have to make sure that they have access. And so, really excited about the partners that we'll be able to partner with. I know BioBus, they've been doing great work in the district, and they've been, really going through the community on their bus, doing these activities. So possibly partnering with them and some other folks who are interested. But I'm really excited that we'll be able to have a state-of-the-art STEM center in our district for young people to come and thrive. And also just not young people, right? I think that this facility needs to be opened up to everyone, because I think everyone can benefit from it. Because let me tell you, sometimes I'm not the best at technology myself.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we all can use a little improvement, masterclass, the whole 9 yards. Don't worry, you're not by yourself on this one here.
Sometimes I'm struggling with my iPhone, so I don't know.
Listen, that's most people. We're not gonna tell everybody.
I'm not ashamed.
You're not by yourself. Don't worry about it. But let's talk about community resources, because I think that's the biggest challenge, right? When you talk about improving a community, having those resources available, and you're doing that fight. You're doing that fight for at the state level, federal level, to make sure the resources are coming in. Now, if I'm a business owner if I'm a person that's out there in your community saying, listen, I want to improve my neighborhood, I want to improve my business, what resources and how can a person be able to tap in to you as their legislative leader to be able to access that?
Well, one of the things I tell people all the time, like, people don't realize how they should use their elected officials. And your first stop, a lot of the times, should be your council member's office. And I say this to everyone in my district. If you start with us, even if we can't help you, we probably can point you in the right direction to get you the help. And even with like local business, SBS, small businesses, um, agency that we have in New York, they have so many resources. We actually did a walkthrough of our commercial corridor with the commissioner of SBS this over the summer, who really was just going around to businesses telling them the different resources that they have, the different products that they can get from them, and how they can partner to get supports. And so, especially business owners who are looking to do business in the Bronx and in District 16, please reach out to your local council member. We can absolutely connect you with SBF, and they can also get you started around like whether it's inspections or certifications or whatever you need. And it's really a good tool and resource, but not a lot of people know about it.
So for yourself, obviously the work goes on. We're in the budget season right now, and things are going full speed ahead. Give me where you are in terms of budget, projection, and then Trump presidency.
Well, where do you want me to start? I'm gonna start on our side, right?
Okay.
Honestly, I don't see this being that big of a fight this year. The mayor already released his executive budget. I'm the chair of Children and Youth Services, so that's really my wellhouse where I like try to stay and dig in. And he restored a lot of youth programs. Nothing is being cut. Everything is staying pretty still for right now. One thing that I've been fighting for the last 3 years have been an additional 100 beds for homeless runaway youth that no one ever wants to talk about, but he put the additional 100 beds in the budget, in the executive budget, so I don't have to fight for that. And so I actually think that we're actually off to a good start for budget season as far as what he laid out in the executive budget. Obviously, there are going to be things that we're going to go back and forth on some of the dancing around the budget, but I do think that from the executive budget, what he laid out, things looked pretty decent. And I think we also just have to always remember we are in trying times. Our new president has been very clear about his plan and what was going to happen, and we're seeing it in real time right now, right? When he was on the campaign trail saying that on day one they were going to start mass deportations. We had a raid in my district very recently where people were pulled out their homes in the early morning hours, and people are scared. We have families who are scared. I had parents come to my office and say that they're not taking their kids to school because they're afraid of ICE. And so I think it's about how we make sure that we're keeping people safe. We're giving them the resources that they need. We're also giving them the information that's going to keep them safe, because it is very trying times.
It is very trying times, and obviously I know the pulse of the community is definitely that of anxiety and that of challenge. How do you give people the assurance as the legislator in the midst of all these trying times that we're feeling politically?
I mean, honestly, I'm trying to give myself reassurance, right? Because sometimes I think people do think that we have a magic wand and we can just fix all the things, and I'm in it with them. My district is comprised of a lot of immigrant populations, and for me, it's thinking about how do we keep each other safe? How do we hold each other accountable? And also, I want us to get to a place where we're not being reactionary. How are we planning, right? I think the difference between when we're thinking about Republicans and Democrats, the Republicans have been planning for a very long time. When you're looking at Project 2025, that was a 900-page document, which was very methodical about what their plans were, which is why even now I'm telling people like they told us their plans, so we just got to figure it out. But how do we use the next not only month and 6 months and 4 years to start making a plan about what we want to see and what we want to deliver for our community?
Yeah, and as lawmakers, I know obviously you're challenged because you represent your people. You're trying to get the best that you can in terms of resources. And then at the same time, you're trying to get the best that you can. You're trying to sustain what you have. And then the hope that possibly to be able to get more. given the fact that we're hearing all of these cuts and these proposed cuts and these executive orders, how optimistic are you for programs in your district, given the fact of where we are under Trump presidency?
I, I'm going to be honest. I think that there's two folds to it. One, I think that in these moments is when people actually are going to show up because elections have real consequences. And I think that there was a lot going on and there was a lot at stake. And I don't think people really believe the elements that were actually going to come out, right? And so I was clear that I knew what he did before and understood what he was going to do again if he got another chance. But I think that making the real connection of like, we do not have the option to sit on the sidelines and not be involved, right? You know, even in my district, we have low voter turnout, right? This is going to affect your everyday life. And so for me, it's also thinking about how do we use this moment as a teachable moment? And then also, how do we use this moment to galvanize and really energize people in community to understand that we can no longer be on the sidelines. You need to get in this fight. And I think because it's going to be so extreme, I have hope. Not only are we going to all fight together, but our young people are going to lead the way in this fight.
You know, there's a tremendous amount of voter apathy that really went into the polls this last election, not just locally, but nationwide. With all that's going on, are you optimistic? Because you say hoping that more people come out, more people become active, and you know you don't want the impetus to be that you've dropped down to -20 in order to get you out to the poll. You want that to be an everyday thing, that we're getting people out and we're moving people out. But given what we're seeing, the trajectory that it looks like we know that we're heading into, are you optimistic that people will say, hey, you know what, I'll exercise this right, not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because people died for it and there's some power behind this?
Absolutely. I hope all of those things come out of it. That's what I'm optimistic about. I feel like people will know, like, because I think, you know, a lot of times people become complacent and say, like, well, how does the government affect me? I've had multiple debates with community members and folks across this district and city who are like, the government doesn't affect me. And in real time, we are seeing in a matter of days how the government affects your everyday life, right? When we're talking about people who are being rounded up and deported, when we're talking about, you know, people not being able to get tuition because of this freeze that was an executive order and now they're pulling back on it. Like, these things are affecting people in real time. The WIC program being up for grabs, and you know, SNAP and taking Title I away from school so young people can't have free school lunch. Like, these are real things. And so my hope is not only that people turn out and start not only voting at the federal level, but at the local level, because all politics is local. And really, the politics at the local level dictates what happens at the federal government. And there was a lot of discord at the local level that people just kind of ignored, right? When we're thinking about who you're voting for your council members, your state electeds, those are a lot of policies that dictate what's going to be going on at the federal government. And they were testing these things out in certain cities and certain places, and people weren't paying attention. So we don't have the option or the luxury not to be involved at this point.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for, you know, participation, that we need to be involved, but we need to be involved long before we get to that place of the polls, because what we're dealing with right now is this crucial, and you know, it takes all hands on deck to be able to do that. I got only a few minutes left, but before we go, I do want to get you an opportunity to talk about what you're excited and as far as what's upcoming and what we can be looking for on the calendar in your area.
Yeah, I mean, we always are trying to do a lot of family fun events. I know coming up in February, we're going to have a silent disco. It's going to be an intergenerational disco where our youth advisory board is planning with our senior advisory board, and we're going to have community members come out. There's going to be different DJs, and there's going to be a silent disco. That's going to be at the Wendell T. Foster Community Center on Jerome Avenue. So we have that event coming up. Also, in February, 2 years ago, I passed Black Girl Magic. So every year on February 15th, the city recognizes that day as Black Girl Magic Day. So we're going to be doing an event in the chambers where we're going to be celebrating the work and the inspiration of Black women across the city. So we're always excited about that. And so, you know, everyone come out to the chambers on February 13th and celebrate Black women. You don't have to be a woman. We take men who get it as well. And, you know, all women across the city, but we really just want to recognize the hard work of Black women and the things and sacrifices they continue to do, even when they're not being protected or feeling loved.
Yeah, it's a lot going on through the course of February as we talk about Black History Month being in full effect and a full calendar. For yourself, how are you managing this calendar and getting around, given the fact there's so many things happening in your area, particularly almost every weekend throughout the course of the week?
Listen, I know I do a lot, but I have an amazing team who always supports me. So if I can't go, someone from my team always is able to step in. But honestly, I try to get to as many events and reach as many people as possible because that's the work that they sent me to do. I tell people all the time, I'm a representative, which means that I need to meet and talk with as many people as possible so that I know how you feel. I know what you want me to do, so I know how to make the right decisions for our community.
Yeah, yeah. And as I get ready to wrap this up with you talking about what's happening coming down the future, obviously we're knowing as far as economics are concerned, things are really tough. Any optimism about jobs?
Yeah, I mean, workforce development has been one of the things that have been at the top of my my agenda since I got here, and thinking about how are we supporting organizations that do workforce development and not just get people jobs, but also how do we get people to elevate in the jobs that they have? How do we get them new skills so that they can get new jobs? And also, too, how are we developing the workforce of young people? And so I'm also thinking about how do we also attract more businesses to be in the Bronx, because that's another thing that's really important around, like, how we have businesses in the Bronx so people can have jobs in their community and they don't have to leave. And so that's something that I myself have been working with the Bronx delegation, our Bronx Borough president, because it's something that we all deem very important.
Yeah, and it's a lot that's out there. I mean, a lot to contend with. We've got jobs, we got the economy, we got homelessness, we got a whole lot of stuff. We got a ferry that's coming. We got a ferry that's coming.
I'm working on it. Listen, my goal is to at least have it in the works before I leave this seat.
Really?
Because I don't see it happening while I'm here, but like it should be in the works before I leave, so that my predecessor can get this across the finish line.
And we could call it like the Althea Stevens.
I mean,
right. Name it. Look. Let me.
You said I did it.
There it is. I'm putting it out there in the atmosphere. There it is. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Obviously, it's great work, and a lot that goes on in behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. So thank you for being on the front lines.
Thank you so much for having me. And anytime, I'm always available. You call, I'll show up.
Yep, we got to get you back in the studio. How about that? So
absolutely. We said that last time. Next
we
time
did. So this is twice now, right?
Yep.
So you know what happens on the third time?
I'll be in the studio.
See, that's fine. We here. All right.
All right. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Take care. Councilwoman Althea Stevens. Listen, we come to the end of the show today. Hope that you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Social Justice Forum. If you want to rewatch this week's edition, catch the recablecast right here on BronxNet.org. You want to join the conversation, present your point of view, visit the website, BronxNet TV. Also, join us next week. We'll have we'll elevate the conversation. We'll elevate the conversation, the discussion, and bring you some further issues and some things that's going on both locally and across the globe. Daren, Jaime saying take care. God bless.